Greetings and salutations, Dave Duford here. We're doing it live on another Ask Me Anything Q&A call. It's a pleasure to be here. It is December 12th, 2025, and we've got lots to talk about today, hopefully, to help you become a better producer selling insurance and to empower you with the knowledge to do the best job that you can. So it's good to be here live. So topics today include, first of all, we're going to do a analysis of a survey that I sent out to my very large email list, asking for insight on what are the best elements that you need to have as a final expense agent with your final expense carriers. So I've utilized the power of AI to comb through the inputs and information received to come up with 9 key insights from a variety of producers that are brand new to many years in the business. Again, with the purpose of helping you understand final expense carriers better, and so that you can know what to look for in a quality final expense carrier and what to not look for. By the way, if you're a final expense carrier watching this, just imagine this is like a free $10,000 consultant assignment. And if you want more of that, my hourly rate is just $20,000 an hour. Reach out to me. I'll tell you all the mistakes you're making and we'll fix you up right. And then agents will send all the business to you. It's that easy. Okay. Then after that, we're going to answer any of your questions as it regards to selling life insurance, insurance in general successfully. If you've got questions about marketing, joining Dig Agency, of course, I'm always happy to answer those questions. You're welcome to throw those into the chat and I'll be at your service to assist. So without further ado, let's go up and can I increase the volume? Sure. Then I increase the volume and then I have people who complain that I'm coming in hot over their headphones. So try to increase your volume first. I just upped it a little bit and then we'll see how that goes. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and set us up for the screen share here and then we'll get started. So first of all, you can see the magic of live streaming right here on the spot. You should see my head get smaller, which is unusual to say the least. And we're going to share my screen and jump right into this presentation that I've carefully put together for you. All right, let me go ahead. So make sure, can you see everything? Perfect, you sure can. So let's go ahead and do spotlight and then let's go ahead and do full screen and we'll jump right into it. Okay, excuse me. So in today's presentation, we're going to talk about our key findings from an internal survey we did to my marketing list with close to 19,000 opted-in agents, discussing specifically what final expense agents really want out of their final expense carriers. And we're going to go into 9 key insights exposed. The purpose of this training is very simple. It's really designed to help you better understand what's important to have in a final expense carrier and what your fellow agents, what many of which have a sufficient amount and significant amount of tenure in the business, are looking for in carriers. We won't talk about specific carriers per se, but I'll kind of mention carriers that may fall into some of these like advantages just to kind of guide you along the way and reinforce kind of why we use certain carriers over others to kind of explain the points being mentioned. So again, this is really built, I think, for a beginning agent, somebody who's thinking about getting into the business or just started and maybe you're not happy with your carriers or you're kind of seeing many options and you're wondering what makes a final expense carrier an optimal solution and an optimal carrier to use. And that's exactly what we're going to cover today. So let's jump right in. So before that, let me double check, make sure everything is good. I don't want to get through live streaming. It's perfect. And then y'all can't hear me. So I think I should be, yep, you guys see me perfect. All right, great. All right, thank you very much. Let's get started. Okay, so a couple of things sharing data-wise with you. First of all, we had 53 total respondents. This is the lay of the land as far as the tenure of the agents. As you can see, the majority of the people replying to this survey have been in the final expense game for a year plus, and then another 19% roughly have been in it longer than 6 months. So this consists of, I would think, roughly 75%, 3/4 are people who have gone through final expense, have had great months, not so great months, dealt with a variety of carriers. So I think the perspective, the point is you can trust this. It's one thing to hear me say something, but it's another to hear a compilation of voices kind of confirm what's good and what isn't. So that's who's responding to this. Also, I think very important is that out of the responses, 67% or 2/3 are remote based agents, whereas the remainder are approximately 32% are approximately in home, which is interesting because we did something like this similarly 5 years ago, and it was probably the inverse. There's been a great and dramatic change in the composition of agents and how they're selling. Whereas pre-COVID, it was almost majority, super majority was face to face. Now, what we're seeing, of course, is remote. And I bet you the population is even larger than what we see here because many of these agents who've been around for many years tend to do what they know well, which is face to face sales. So, long story short, you're going to get a good mix here from different perspectives. So, one of the questions we asked on the survey was please pick the 3 most important aspects you desire in a final expense carrier and only pick 3 options. So the idea is that it's hard to ask somebody, okay, what is the one thing that matters the most to you about a carrier? Because there's several. If you've been in this business long enough, it's not enough just to have a carrier with low pricing or competitive pricing or a carrier that has easy underwriting. You can have one of those elements of a carrier with one carrier, but if it's missing out on everything else, it's probably not going to be used that often. So a good carrier is well-rounded and typically has a special niche that makes it a notch or 2 better than the others. And so I wanted to capture that concept with how this question was phrased, so you can see kind of over a more weighted perspective what of the options here are the most important. And what we see here on the screen is in this order: an easy application process, easy underwriting, and competitive pricing are the 3 most important things that agents look for in utilizing a final expense carrier. And I want to explain this again if you're newer here or thinking about getting into final expense, what this actually means and why you should really take special care of this. First of all, easy application process. What does that mean? Easy application, in my mind, means it's not a complicated process to get a deal done. So, for example, with most people doing remote-based sales, it's vital that the application process is an electronic-based one. Okay, so you can go into your desktop or whatever type of PC you're using, and then input the information on the client's application effortlessly. Okay, this stands in opposition to a verbal application process, which everything is done verbally over the phone. You may not type much into it, but then you've got to take all this time to complete a verbal application. Thankfully, most carriers have moved away from a verbal-based application more to an e-application process, but it doesn't stop there. The other thing that's very important is to make the signature process simple for not only the client, for you, the agent, but also the client, Mildred. So if you're new to my channel, we call our final expense prospects Mildred. Think 70-year-old boomer who barely knows how to use a computer. If you send over a DocuSign process, or if you send over even a 3 to 5 step process that initiates an email, but you have to go through a couple steps to get a signature, you will lose your clients. You will not make sales, and you would have otherwise lost a deal you would have closed had you had an easier application process. This is the nature of the business, and it's hard to rectify. So we have to expect from our carriers an application process that simplifies the signature collection process. Typically, what we see is the easiest ways to collect signatures are through some form of text message verification. That's where internally inside of the application, you initiate a text message that goes to the client's phone. Most of our clients now have cell phones, text message processes. This wasn't the case even 5 years ago, but certainly now is the case, especially if you use a Facebook-oriented lead, which most of you should be. Most of our clients by default are doom scrolling Facebook on their phones, not their desktop. Therefore, they can use the text message type of process. So with that said, you have to have an easy application process. The alternative would be a very simple multi-minute process to get a signature verbally. So I like Guarantee Trust Life is an excellent carrier for that. They've got one of the easiest application processes available. A great text to sign application process, American Amicable, is very good. Excuse me. There are many others that are sufficient as well. Um, Easy underwriting. I think, and you think of that more as underwriting is easy to understand. Not that everybody gets approved. That might blend into this to some extent, but the policy that you go to apply for, the underwriting is clear to understand. It's not like convoluted. You're likely not going to get your application submitted to underwriting or rated up, which means what you applied for actually turns out being more expensive at a lower quality product. You want a carrier that consistently, not nothing is going to consistently approve everything 100% of the time except guaranteed issue because it's guaranteed. But you don't want carriers that send applications off, to me, in my opinion, for remote-based agents, no more than 30% of the time. If you're getting 3 out of 10 of your apps submitted to underwriting, first of all, fix your underwriting process, how you underwrite your deal, making sure you collect the prescriptions, that you read word for word every question on the application. But if you're doing that well and you're still getting a lot of submit to underwrites, then likely switch carriers. So this is less of an issue if you're working face to face, because one of the things that's an issue with remote based sales is our clients are just more prone to hang up if they detect any sort of difficulties in getting anything done. So, as a pro tip, always go into a sale when you're selling over the phone with a plan B. If the first doesn't go through, have a scripted process to prepare the client to pivot to another option if your first option doesn't work out, just to verbally get them to commit. But easy underwriting is really important to the process in order to, in my opinion, have the best carriers out there. And the last here is competitive pricing. I do think it's important to have competitive pricing, and I tend to agree with the 58% that selected this as one of their options. It's not the most important, but it is important. We have carriers like American Amicable's Platinum product that actually has better persistency, which means the amount of business that's on the book stays on the books after you write it, even though it's much higher priced than other products we have, simply because of the added benefits and features with the product. But I think at par, it's better to have, especially things like guaranteed issue, a better price guaranteed issue product, or even these Medline products are important, or a price buster that's like competitively priced, like Mutual of Omaha, Trinity Family Benefit, in order to secure a competitive price when necessary. Having those on hand can help you secure deals you otherwise couldn't get. So, moral of the story, when you're looking for an organization to join, and make sure they have multiple options, that kind of goes without saying. But second of all, make sure that there's a carrier that can be a low price leader. So if you have to replace an inferior policy, or if the client's price sensitive, then you can pivot to a carrier that can secure a better deal. Some other things that I thought were interesting here, like, for example, Social Security deposit billing. This is really important if you're new to the business. All this means is you take the money out when Uncle Sam deposits it and not a second later. Okay, so if you don't use Social Security deposit billing, it's conceivable that you can take the draft out several days after the deposit hits, because how Social Security is deposited in the client's account. If the third falls on a Saturday, banks don't ACH deposit, but Uncle Sam deposits it Friday. But if the third, when your client normally gets the money, is on a Saturday, we can't draft early, so we have to draft on Monday, which means it's going to be the 5th. And the clients had the whole weekend to blow their money on smokes and booze, as I used to historically say, and still do. So the point is that a Social Security deposit option will take that money out that Friday. So it's kind of a moving target. And the less time between you taking the money out of the client's account, in other words, if you can beat them to the ATM before they pull their money up, the better chances your policy that's going to be on the books stays on the books. Okay, it's really, really important. Transamerica actually was the big player that invented this about 11 years ago. And it's crazy because not all carriers have this. It just blows my mind, because it just makes sense that if you draft faster, you're going to have better persistency. And they've showed a very high amount of cognizance about our clients. You have to beat them to the ATM. Sometimes they'll take their money unknowingly. A lot of times they just forget the bills. They're seniors after all. Other things that are important: superior agent support. Some funny things actually didn't end up as being that important, like producer convention trip. You hear a lot of carriers like pushing convention trips as like the cat's meow, the most important thing that you should worry about, which exotic destination you're going to go to. Nobody really who's been in this business long enough cares about that stuff, incidentally. Only one person indicated that was important. First year commission levels, in other words, meaning I want to write the highest commission product. You can see that is not that important relative to the other aspects of the carrier. Obviously, what you get paid is important, but if you're getting paid a lot of money on a product, but the application is difficult, or the underwriting is difficult, or the pricing is out of whack, like, so what, right? So this goes back to what I'm saying earlier. What you choose as far as your products go is going to be a combination of a variety of different issues. You can't just have one thing like the highest comp dictate it. Okay. Other things, superior agent support. That's kind of interesting. I forgot to put in here superior. Oh, I did. Superior client support is 11%. So again, it's one of those things where my thoughts on this, agent support is important, but because final expense is such a transactional sale, there certainly requires a bit of salesmanship to get the deal closed. But this isn't a product that you're going to have to like take a bunch of time to take care of. Okay. So I think that's why you see less concern from the tenured agents on agent support and even on client support. Part of it is the tenured agents are probably taking care of their clients. And on the other hand, to be honest with you, a lot of the carriers just suck at support. They've outsourced them overseas. It's ever since COVID, the amount of time that you have to wait to talk to somebody has just increased. And there's almost like this, I think there's like this level of expected poor performance in home office support, whereas probably 10 to 15 years ago, it was an absolute requirement. Now I think it's just seen as, oh, well, this is just how it is anymore. So I think that's why you don't see it as in that much importance. Okay. So let me check to see if there's any questions here. And then I'll keep going here. Let's see here. List aligns. Hey, roast beef. List aligns with my feelings so far. Almost to a T. The only thing I was added is a rapid quoting tool. Yes, absolutely integrated in the application process. I would say that would definitely fall under easy application process. I would say a lot of people do use insurance toolkits, insurancetoolkits.com. Great product. Definitely the gold standard of the business on quoting correctly. So definitely check that out. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. So we've got a little bit more of a detail from the survey here that we're going to jump into now. First of all, the 9 takeaways specifically. First of all, commission still matters, but it's not number one by itself. Again, a big MLM, lots of MLMs push how high their compensation is. So you would think that that's the most important thing that matters. It is important, but it's not nearly as important in actually looking at what top producers say and longtime producers, especially when compared to things like the ease of underwriting, speed of approval, and then also quality of support. Again, the takeaway here is agents just don't want the highest commission. They want the highest commission they can actually place business with consistently. In other words, it's worth nothing. If you look at it this way, if you're paid 100% commission and 75 and 80% of your business gets approved as applied for, that real commission is 80%. Whereas if you have something that's 120% commission, but half the business gets approved as applied for, then your real commission is 60%. So what's better? Obviously, it's the lower commission. So these are things you have to take into consideration, is how often does what you apply for get approved relative to the actual commission rate. Very important. The other thing that is really important for remote-based agents, with which most of you are who are watching this, is that you just don't get second shots as easily as the face-to-face agents. If you go through an application, and picture this, Mildred's tired, she's been running errands all day, she's laid out watching Gunsmoke. Do you think she wants to go through another 20-minute application on the phone, especially if you didn't prompt her with a sense of professionalism that some things happen and it's best to prepare that there is another option we won't use unless we have to? So if you're not thoughtful about this process and preparing the client, you're bound to lose deals you otherwise would have closed. Whereas a face-to-face agent, it's hard to throw you physically out of the door. It's easier for just Mildred to hit the end button. So moral of the story, make sure that you're pivoting and got other options, but use carriers that issue as applied for at a high frequency. We use American Amicable at Dig Agency as our primary product because it really does a great job of getting stuff approved as applied for. Not 100% of the time. There's definitely referrals to underwriting, but there's a lot of clarity in how the underwriting exists, and they pay decently too. This is a good combination. Fast, simple underwriting is a massive deal. This is one of the top 2 most repeated themes in every survey that we did. agents specifically value quick decision making. In other words, we want to see and approve our policies as quickly as possible, whether that's approved as applied for or counter offered, meaning that maybe you don't get what you apply for, but you see what you actually do get versus a referral to underwriting. In fact, referrals to underwriting are kind of the death knell. You really want to avoid those as much as possible because a lot of the times with carriers, that just is a guaranteed decline. And again, if you're pitching, you're swinging, and half the time that's happened, and you're in trouble. You're going to lose clients you otherwise would have closed. And I would advise you to consider a different carrier if it's more than 30% of the time. Again, fewer medical hangups. Again, when there's clarity on the underwriting, the prescriptions that are applied for, and you know what you're about to get into, all that much better. And that's why you want to use that carrier. You want as much as possible. It's not, the carriers can't guarantee this. None of them will, except guaranteed issue. You want as many predictable outcomes as possible. Again, what I've seen, we like American Amicable because they're very predictable for the most part. Stuff gets sent to underwriting with them. I like SBLI on certain occasions. They can be pretty predictable. Another carrier we like, especially on the broker side, if you're not in our free lead program, but you're buying leads at a higher commission, a Guarantee Trust Life is an excellent product. Largely because its underwriting is very easy, and it's a near guaranteed issue product. So when something doesn't work and they get rated up as graded or modified, Guarantee Trust Life can be a great plan B product to pivot to because you know more likely than not you're going to get approved for, and it's going to be better than a guaranteed issue option. Takeaway here is a carrier that pays well but consistently declines business is effectively a low-paying carrier. Number 3, the application process can make or break a carrier. Bad app processes showed up over and over as a reason agents avoid carriers. And what do agents want as listed as they did in the survey? Clean e-apps. They want an e-app that's easy to understand. It's not confusing. Obviously, what they want is somebody who's obviously designed the e-app and has worked on it a multitude of times to make it easy for the end user to complete, meaning you, the agent. Okay, we've seen, if you've been in this business long enough, applications that are confusing. It's not clear if you need to add something or not. And these are not hard things to fix. But again, the carriers, a lot of the times, they just don't understand this process intuitively or have a team that really works with the agent to develop an intuitively based application. Be very careful with who you use. Make sure the e-apps are very easy to understand. Fewer underwriting back and forths, same thing as described earlier, and minimal resubmissions. Again, a takeaway here is agents will abandon a carrier purely over friction. Even when everything else is good, you can have great underwriting, you can have great pricing. But if the application process is difficult or is either on the end of the agent or on the end of the client, you just won't see as much business done. Perfect example of this, we love Mutual of Omaha. Problem with Mutual of Omaha is that you have to rely on the client to do some level of DocuSign, and there's a multi-signature process that can befuddle a senior client of ours. So we only use that if we feel the client is cognizant enough to complete the application, and if it's an absolute must. And we would love to write, I know many agents would love to write Mutual of Omaha more if it was a little bit easier to complete as far as the application goes. Issue age and coverage flexibility are silent kingmakers. In other words, agents repeatedly reference higher issue ages. So agents really like it when you can issue coverage at 85 or even 90. Like Aetna is a really good product. It'll go up to age 89 in those circumstances where it makes sense. And then GTL will go up to age 90 with their Heritage product. Flexible face amounts, having really low amounts of coverage available for like cremation type policies all the way up to like 30, 40, 50,000 of coverage. We see more carriers that are offering that. That's always useful. And then broader approval windows, of course, meaning, we're not looking back 5 years or have you ever had any of the conditions, like stuff that has, I would say, narrow application in getting approval because, again, the longer period of time you look for, the harder it is to actually apply for. And of course, the carriers have to have some limits on what they accept as underwriting, but having some flexibility there is always a good thing. Carriers that can place older, riskier clients win long-term loyalty from producers. Again, what we find too, that agents really like to use about, if let's say you have 10 carriers, an agent will probably use 3 to maybe 5 of those carriers 90% of the time. And of those 5, 3 of them will be used probably in totality 60 to 70% of the time. So there's three of those, and then of those three, probably one is about 40 to 50%. So again, that one that can do a lot of these major things at a high level are usually the ones that are rewarded with a great cross section of business, healthy business, the not so healthy, but everything in between. And then the carriers that only do like one or two of them well are they just end up being niche carriers. They don't get the best cross section of healthy clients, which carriers want. They just don't want all your bad cases or your direct express business. They want to have a cross section of everything. It's better for their underwriting guidelines and their actuarial guidelines if they do that. But if they're only getting the niche, the COPDs, because that's the only one that takes it level, that's a problem for them. So carriers, the way that you circumvent that is having a carrier or having all of these items that we're talking about in order to just give agents the ability to put a majority of their business with you. I can tell you this too. I would bet, I didn't ask this, but I bet all of these agents that surveyed would love to do one carrier if they could. If they could put all of their business with the one carrier, they absolutely would, because it would simplify their life. Agents are kind of forced to be in the position to have a multitude of options. It makes the business slightly more complex, but life is way easier if it's only one carrier. Now, there are programs that are one carrier only approaches, but if you dial into that, there's significant shortcomings, whether it's pricing or getting the policy approved, whereas they could get it's inferior with your product, but way better somewhere else, but you can't sell it because you choose not to, or your company doesn't allow it. So these are the shortcomings. But the point is that as much as a carrier can do all of these things the best, like American Amicable, again, I promise American Amicable didn't fund me for my endorsement, but that's why we use American Amicable in the telesale space a lot, because their application's easy, gets approved a lot of the times, prices are fair, easy application process. It's just one after another high quality features that come with the product. Home office and underwriting support drives loyalty. Bad customer service and can't reach the home office are major reasons for carrier rejection. And I would kind of push back on this to some extent. I think probably for some of your older school agents, this is more important. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be important either. I mean, there's one particular product we're using right now. I won't name them because I don't want to badmouth them too much, but they're incredibly difficult to get to pick up the phone. They don't have the proper staff. If you have a death claim, they're very difficult to deal with, but they will take stuff level that nobody else will. And their guaranteed issue is pretty easy to deal with. So this is one of the things. It's like, as soon as another product comes close to that company's gone if they can't fix the issue. So it is one of those things where it is that give and take again. You can deal with some of these problems, but as soon as you don't have to anymore, and this is the nature of final expense, it's a competitive product environment, you're going to chuck that company to the curb. But yeah, the more clear communication, the faster follow-ups, if underwriters are accessible, these are all positive things that are very helpful. Number 6, why agents avoid certain carriers unfiltered. The most common deal killers are bad underwriting philosophy. So for example, they don't allow certain issues like diabetic neuropathy, or they're just gray on certain issues, and there's no clarity until you actually take a shot to see if it's approved, but you take the risk that you won't get it done if it ends up getting declined and the client hangs up. Poor payout reliability. I think this has more to do with just like death claims, concerns about that. Slow processing. So carriers that take forever to update applications, get them approved, to go through the underwriting process, and inaccessible support. These are things that will be ultimately the death knell if there's no redeeming qualities to keeping the carrier around. And again, and this is unfortunately the problem with a lot of agents. This is part of the reason why, if you don't have good training and support and guidance on this stuff, why a lot of agents fail is they join a company, they find a carrier, and they have all these bad experiences, and they don't make money that they would have made. And then they don't have the money to buy leads or to support themselves if they're getting free leads. And then they end up failing out of the business, not because they didn't have what it takes to be successful. I mean, from a skill set basis, they did, but they didn't have the right carriers, right? So these are very important things to be concerned with. New agents should not chase one carrier. Again, veteran agents consistently advise start with multiple carriers. Let clients dictate the fit. Now, it's not let them choose which company. It's based off of their health. let that dictate which one you choose for them. And don't marry one product. Carriers come and go. You'll be here much longer if you're in the business for long than a lot of these carriers will. So, don't be too hung up on a specific carrier. I always say this about carriers. I've been doing this since 2011 as an agent, running an agency since 2013. I would love to say that carriers treat you like you're important to them, but you're not. You're just another number. It took me having an unfortunate incident with a great company that I thought was great, but over a misunderstanding and disagreement, I was immediately terminated. And I didn't do anything wrong. It's just a disagreement. And it showed me, even after all of their attempts to make our relationship like family, that's not what this is about. You are a number and a cog in the machine. So use them for their utility, and don't be surprised if things change and you're left behind. That's why it's always important to have multiple options, and why I think in the final expense business, being a broker is absolutely critical. Top producers think in toolboxes, not favorite carriers. Again, which one's going to just do the job and take care of my client the best is really one of the best ways to go about. Point number 8, trust and reputation still matter, but only after performance. This is kind of interesting. Brand name doesn't really matter all that much. You may be thinking, oh, you mentioned Mutual of Omaha. That's a well-known insurance company. And even more so for our clientele seniors, they all watch Wild Kingdom growing up. If you're over 65, you know what I'm talking about. If you're my age or younger, you have no clue what I'm talking about, unless you've sold to seniors long enough. They have a recognition. It's like Snoopy. They know, and Peanuts, it's like they know this stuff from childhood, and they can recognize it right away. And it has this immediate connection. Mutual of Omaha has that. But some agents getting into this business, once they recognize a brand name, they think, well, that's the one to use. And that's really a crutch. You don't really need brand at all. I was reading a post on Insurance Forum, and a longtime poster there, John Duggar, he said something like, he said something funny. He said something, he's like, I could sell rip-off life insurance company fine, and nobody would ever say anything twice, and I'd do just fine. And he was making a point that the name doesn't matter. Plenty of agents who's been doing this long enough, they'll say things like, I don't even tell them the name of the company until it's already been approved. Because it's not, the product doesn't sell, it's you sell. That's a really important takeaway too as an agent. It's I don't care if you work for New York Life, MetLife, brand name company that's been around forever and a day. If you suck, if you're no good at connecting with the client and understanding what they want to accomplish and solving the problem, throw out all that brand name stuff right out the window. It doesn't matter. Because what really matters and what sells life insurance, what sells final expense is you and your ability to listen to the client, help them, and then show them how your product solves their problem and getting them to take action today. And Mutual of Omaha, New York Life, and any other company, brand name or not, is not going to do that. It's you that are going to do that. So always remember that. So brand recognition did show up on the survey, but far less than the importance of underwriting, pay, process. So again, a no-name carrier that places business smoothly wins every time. And last but not least, persistency is an under-talked but still hidden priority. So let's talk about what persistency is. Persistency is the amount of your business that stays after it's approved and paid for. So for example, if Mildred takes a policy out for me and starts paying January 1st, and she makes it that first year, I have 100% persistency with that client. So what we're trying to strive for is writing policy that sticks, or writing a policy that sticks, right? Because when you get advanced to commission and it lapses, you got to pay a part of that commission back, sometimes all of it, depending on the carrier. So making sure that you're writing quality business, meaning business that doesn't lapse, should be your number one goal. Okay, beyond getting the closed deal, it's also getting the deal to stay closed. That makes sense? So how do you improve persistency? And why do carriers matter? Well, first thing is Social Security deposit billing, making sure billing is done correctly, and choosing carriers that just bill on a consistent basis according to their date or Social Security deposit billing is really important. Also, another thing with persistency has to do with the pricing. Although I used to believe this more, even up to the prior to this year, I believe pricing is less important than I originally did, but it's still important. What's more important is making sure that the policy that you write maximizes the amount of benefit and as much as possible gets that client level coverage if they're approved and eligible for it. In other words, if I have to write a guaranteed issue product on the client when I could have written a first day full coverage product like with COPD, but I didn't have a product that would do that, it's just a matter of time before that product gets replaced by another agent because that client may not be happy. They'll go on and fill out another form on Facebook because that's what they do. And then somebody will call and say, yeah, I can get you first day full coverage. And they're sold and you lose the deal. So it's very important if you want to make sure persistency is at its highest level, make sure that you're not just getting competitively priced products, but you're also making sure that you have a variety of products and you sell the right one to the client based off of the condition. The last thing I'll add to this with persistency, because it is really important, it's always been really important with me, is make sure you sell the correct way. Don't push your client who is on a fixed income, who doesn't make a lot of money, into buying something they can't afford. Don't be too good of a salesperson. I like to do what's called selling the premium. That's where you start high, but you work lower if the client gives any sort of pushback. We need full 100% approval that the client can actually afford it. Like if I say, for example, I say, if I can qualify for a program today and it was between $80 and $100 a month, would that fit your budget? If they're like, well, yeah, I think so. Yeah, that doesn't sound confident to me. So what I would say is, hey, when I'm hearing you say, I think so, it's probably a little too expensive. Let's do this. What if I can find you a similar program and it was somewhere between, say, 50 and 75 a month? Would that fit your budget? Yeah, that would definitely fit my budget. Then I'll just step it down and then pick a budget or pick options between that budget range. Does that make sense? So the idea here is that part of making sure your client stays on the books is making sure it's actually affordable, because a lot of people don't want to admit that they're broke or that they don't make a lot of money or they're in a financial quandary. Okay. And we should know our clients well enough that they've gotten to this age, they haven't bought life insurance, and a person who's at this point in their life, if they're not in great financial shape, they're likely not going to get in better financial shape, like substantially better. So we need to be respectful of that and also understand the reality of our client situation. So with that said, never push an arbitrary, just made up amount of coverage that you think they should have. Stick to what their budget is. Let them tell you with certainty if they feel they can afford it or not. If they can't, just walk it down. And what you'll find is this is the way, along with what I discussed earlier, with competitively priced products and billing practices, to minimize lapses and thus increase your persistency to the highest level. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the findings of today's carrier training. I hope you got some insight from this. I'm going to ask everybody here who is watching live, if you got questions, whoops, sorry guys, you are welcome now to throw your questions in the chat. I'm just going to open this up to just a basic Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer questions about the carriers or anything else that, for that matter, that you'd like to discuss. I am here to avail your questions, so I'm going to jump right in. Okay. Hey, Ray, Rafe. Moo has the easiest e-app according to my experience. Yeah, maybe as an e-app, but a signature process is the thing that I hear the most gripes about. Again, if you're in the final expense market, there's a difference between being in the final expense market and selling final expense. You can sell final expense to people who are computer literate, and Mutual of Omaha will be just fine. But the final expense market is typically, the final expense market of people are typically not computer literate. So you want to make sure the products you're selling are just like brain dead simple to complete. Okay. And a text signature is the easiest way to do it, so they don't have to open anything on their email or go through any sort of complicated processes otherwise. The more you can get to what I just described and less to anything else, the better for your business. Besides GTL, who has the upper age range products? Aetna, for sure. There's probably other ones I'm not thinking of. I'll let the chat throw that out there. Primerica. Primerica, let me know what you want to know about Primerica. There's so much to talk about there. Hold on one second. Okay, let's keep going. Why isn't Transamerica your number carrier? From what I understand, they will give day one coverage for diabetes, COPD, heart disease, AFib, and congestive heart failure. So Trans and I have a long history. In fact, I started writing with them in 2012. They're my number one carrier I wrote the most volume with, probably next to United Heritage. Transamerica, I used to recruit a ton of people to them, and they were always in some sense on the edge of final expense, cutting edge of final expense. But they've always had significant issues with getting business approved. I was always fine with them. I mean, they had a more complicated underwriting process, excuse me. And I dealt with it. I knew how to handle the business. But what I discovered in recruiting agents was their level of complexity and lack of clarity in underwriting. It got worse, especially like 2015, 16, 17. And we just stopped writing business with them because they were just so frustrating getting stuff approved as applied for. And part of the process back then too was it was a paper app, and you didn't know you got an approval till you sent it in after you got home from the application. Like, this is back in the day. Y'all have it lucky. You can get approved on the spot, or pivot if you don't with another carrier. But we had to wait with Transamerica at that point. But now this new product is excellent. We're using it in the broker program. I kind of slow rolled it with some brokers who are really good just to get their feedback. They love it. We've got more brokers using it now. In fact, I'm going to ask them kind of some follow-ups and see how it's looking with them. But moral of the story, yeah, I think the product is really good. We're excited because diabetic neuropathy is approved. Lots of other stuff we normally can't get first day full coverage with is approved. And they're proving to be a lot more consistent with their underwriting than they used to, which is, again, I'm shocked because I swore off Transamerica many years ago. I even had a shirt that said Trans Amendment, which referenced the fact they would amend a lot of your applications, and then half the time everything sent in would just never get approved, and it would just frustrate me. So anyways, no, they're good now. I think they fixed a lot of their problems, but we'll keep you up to date on that. All right. Recently, AmAm has been asked for optical interviews back to back. Still, it's better than a lot. Yeah, if you're doing that, you may be flagged as an agent. I'm not sure exactly how they do things, but if they see that you're sending in stuff that isn't consistently good, they may opt for that. Sometimes it happens with other carriers. It just depends on the circumstances. It might be an IMO based thing too. They're trying to slow down bad business coming from an IMO or an agency. Again, I'm putting words in their mouth. I don't know if this is true or not, but these are the things I've seen happen other carriers do. And sometimes they do that with us. I mean, we'll go through a period of time where we just seem like we get more underwriting sent to underwritings. And what we try to teach our agents is pivot, use another carrier when you can, and build that script into your presentation so your client understands, hey, this may not come back as approved, so we're going to put in another application just in case. No big deal. Have all that information handy and ready to rock if that ends up being the case. But make sure you sell that ahead of time. That's the important takeaway. Okay. Transamerica also have one of the lowest price points for level compared to other carriers. They do take Direct Express on an advanced basis too. I think that's important to mention too. Yeah, they do a lot of things right for sure, Jose. 100% agree. Hey, Chris, what one thing does the next new product have to do to earn market share? Well, so, what have we seen? Think about, I think too, Chris. So Chris runs a channel. Chris, throw it in the chat if you want to. I think it's life insurance and everything in between. So Chris has been around a long time. We're friends. Think about the major carriers that have come in and how they've done this. So the major carriers that do this are either going to go through one of the big distribution hubs like Integrity or AmeriLife, right? Like, that's the play to go through and kind of have some top-down implementation. The other strategy is to come and buy the business, right? So there's a particular carrier that came in, you know who I'm talking about. There was no prescription check or MIB. They literally took anything as long as the client, they just took the client at their word without doing any underwriting. And that's happened several times. It happened with Great Western many years ago, and then they stopped that nonsense before they pulled out a couple of years ago. I mean, they would take they took a dialysis client of mine, first day full coverage, many, many years ago. This is when I was writing, like in 2016, which is very hard to come by. And so they'll buy the market just by saturation and taking anything and everybody. So I think that's one play. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if that's necessarily what a carrier wants to do. I think having a niche is important. I think of like a Trinity or Family Benefit. I don't think Alvin over there wants all of the final expense business that's out there. He just wants the healthy people. And, I think my opinion, that's part of the reason they've had a voice app is because it makes the application process more difficult. Sometimes if you make things too easy for the client, then you get it's ironic. You would think the company wants a ton of business. Not always. They want good business that sticks. And there's this like, you can take a lot of business and make it easy, but you're going to get a lot of trash mixed in, a lot of poor quality business. Not like the clients are trash, but just people who shouldn't have been approved, or a lot of lapse issues. Or if you run to an MLM, one of the things that makes MLMs appealing to life insurance carriers is just have these massive distribution networks of, tens of thousands of people occasionally selling a policy. And they may not like the quality of business, but they can get the volume out of it. I don't like that play. I don't think if I'm a carrier, knowing what I know as an agency owner, why I would get in bed with any MLM. I mean, guys, like one of the things MLMs do is they'll say things like, hey, just write everything with XYZ carrier, just list everything no. If it gets turned down, then pivot to something else. Like they don't even underwrite. Like it's sickening. And the carriers, I think, would lose their minds if they actually cared about this stuff. That's a question that I don't know if they actually do or not. You think they would. But the amount of just garbage that gets put through and that's accepted because of high volume is terrible. It's part of the reason we see a lot of these carriers. If you've been around long enough, like there have been a ton of carriers that have exited over the past couple of years. I think because of a gross misunderstanding of the consumer experience, the agent experience, what it's like to deal with an MLM, and what the nature of the market is, and the upsides and downsides of it. Like a lot of carriers just don't get it. And there was one carrier that was in the market. I can think of two right now. One, I think they've been temporarily shut down, came through the MLM track. I mean, they can't keep up with the business, but all of their business comes from the MLM. And then another one that came in, had a great, fantastic product. They can't get any contracting done now because they overplayed and dumped into the deep end too quick. So, anyways, long story short, to answer your question, Chris, I mean, the one thing a new product should do is make life easy. That's the key thing. And for me, it's easy application. It's not really ever one thing. Easy application, easy approval process, clarity on underwriting. You don't have to have the best pricing. That's less important than those other two, and really good billing for sure. Does American Amicable do voice signature? I think they do, Jose. Not 100% sure. I think they do. What are the best states and worst states for final expense? So we keep our best states under wraps. I don't talk about that if you're interested in joining my agency until you do join my agency, because I feel like we have a $50 to $100 higher case size with this collection of states that we work. I don't know 100% sure if it is or it isn't, or if it's a short-term anomaly, but we've seen weeks where our historical AP average has been 954 AP over the course of like 8,000 policies written. It's about $80 a month. But we've seen that average go up to like 85 or 90 over the course of several weeks to a month. And I think that came about after switching up the states and targeting specific states. So, and all that means is that I've got $50 to $100 more in premium, which is very, very good commission on average, higher than working other states. Now that's one component to determining if it's worth it. There's also cost per sale differences, et cetera, that kind of thing. But we go over that as soon as you join. I can tell you what states I don't work. I don't work New York. Don't work New York ever. I don't think they have a tenable final expense application process, with the exception of, what's that one carrier up there? They do a DocuSign, and they're a little fraternal out of Boston. I forget what they're called. When you call them, it sounds like you're talking into like a cave. It's probably just one little office somewhere in a building. But they'll do an app there. But no one really does apps in New York, because New York is kind of its own legislative body for insurance, and they're just so heavy-handed with commissions, maximal commissions, which carriers have to be domiciled or have an office in New York State, last I checked, in order to even offer it in the state. So it's a great state to get. It's a great state to get leads in. They're very inexpensive, but you just can't sell them anything. So it ends up being a big pain. Okay, yeah, so there is another one. Yeah, but no e-app, right? So what are you going to do? Send them a paper application? So New York is off. We don't sell a lot of the northeastern states. I think there's probably opportunities up there, but final expense tends to be a more lower income client. So it tends to be more Southeast, Midwest. California can be pretty good though too. So it's just I don't know. We just Alaska. We don't do Alaska. All right, perfect. Any final questions here before we wrap it up? I hope you learned some things here today with the carriers, which ones I like, what to be concerned with. I spend a lot of my time really selling the sales strategy and the importance of overcoming objections, how to sell the why, how to position your product, how to position pricing. But this is just as important. In our training process, we don't really spend a lot of time on this until a couple of days before we get on the phone. We've got some really good agent, top producer based application walkthroughs that explain the application, why we choose certain carriers over another. Those are really helpful. But this is really important to master because, again, it's one thing to like take a sale to its conclusion, deal with the closing objections, and just not get it after you've rebutted it a bunch of times. And it's like, you tried, It's another thing to overcome those objections, close them, but then lose the client because you submitted an application, 20 minutes later, it's declined and they're pissed at you. That could have been prevented. It's just like a skill set you got to develop, like overcoming objections. You got to develop the skill set of your carrier selection. Okay. So I hope this helped. And last call for questions, and we'll wrap it up here. Sam, hey Sam, what is the fallout of business even if one priced and served the client well? I say historically a good number is 25% of your business. Some carriers it's better, some it's worse. Guaranteed issue is probably the worst persistency or worst fallout. It just historically has been. It's been so bad for some people, not for me, but some they just don't ride it at all. I don't agree with that. I think some money's better than no money, even if it ends up lapsing or to a degree lapses, especially if you're buying leads. So yeah, I emailed you regarding position. If lacrosse, I'll answer that in a second. Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, let me wrap this up. So lacrosse, anybody else, if you're interested in joining Dig Agency or seeing what we're about, of course, everything we do is final expense, remote-based sales. We have a free lead program. We also have a high commission broker program. We are an anti-MLM agency. I could care less if you recruit. We certainly don't ask you to sell your friends and family. We have a complete system to help you get up and running, to teach you the art and the craft of selling final expense over the phone from the comfort of your own home. We have trainers, mentors that will actually help you close while you're on the phone, answer your questions, daily Q&A calls, AI to help you understand what you're doing right in your sales calls, what you can improve. The best dialers, CRMs available. If you're brand new to this business or experienced looking for a new home, definitely consider what we have to do. We do an excellent job. We've done business since 2013. I've been in final expense since 2011. I have 4 best-selling books about final expense, others about insurance on Amazon. If you want to check it out, just put in David Dufour. And obviously I'm on YouTube and I've been doing videos for 11 years. So if you want to find out more, where do you go? daviddufour.com. There's a link below. Watch the video at the top of the page. Watch it completely. It'll tell you exactly what next steps to take if you like what you see. And that's it, y'all. We'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed today's broadcast. And if we don't see you